Joe Oliver, you were just about to make a point about the healthcare system. Please make that point.
Yeah, well, let's to put it less than charitably, the healthcare system is broken. We heard at the beginning we need 2 weeks to flatten the curve because otherwise the healthcare system is going to be overwhelmed. And we have far fewer beds, ICU beds per capita than they do in the United States, for example. So even though their numbers were higher, they're better able in a lot of states to cope with it. Well, why is it now, 2 years later, we're still hearing the identical thing, even though there are fewer people in ICU in Canada than there were in the previous waves? It seems as if we didn't increase the number of ICU beds, which isn't only the physical beds, of course. It's nurses and doctors to tend to the patients. But that's been a failure. It's not only been a health failure, but it has economic and educational implications because decisions are being based on the fact that we don't have adequate healthcare capacity, and that's part of the reason that the governments are closing down the economy.
Well, Tony, you would know better as a former Minister of Health. You can't just dream up an ICU nurse to take care of an additional bed overnight or even in a year, because that takes a lot of training and a lot of time. So the challenge is you have to manage what comes into that ICU because you can't manage having enough staff with the right skill set to manage that bed. Otherwise, they would instantly create more ICU beds. It's why they sent adult patients into Toronto's sick kids at the height of the second or third wave.
But it's been 2 years.
I think they've managed to do the best they can under the circumstance. But the reality is that governments in every Western country is moving to 80% healthcare in the community and 20% in acute care settings. The world over, they've been doing that for years. All of a sudden, we have a pandemic where, sheesh, I wish it was reversed, and you can't just instantly make that happen.
No, you can't.
No,
but let me just say this. Let me just say this, since Sandra's invited me to be on my show. Because I agree, you can't just whip up new doctors and nurses and beds out of thin air. But think about the economic cost that we're going through, which is in the tens of billions of dollars. I could easily think that with good imagination, if we spent $5 billion on ICU capacity in a year, I bet you we could come up with new ICU beds if we had, and $5 billion is a drop in the bucket of the economic cost of lockdown. So the one thing I would say is government and public health have to have better imaginations, because right now we're in the situation where it's lockdown whack-a-mole. And that's not, we can't keep doing this. We're just doing the same thing over and over again. People are not going to comply after a while. So
I would agree. You want to be able to increase and decrease. We have to accept that we're going to spend money that we might not necessarily need at any given time to be prepared to go to 120% instead of 100. 100%. And that's where, unfortunately, the governments don't want to be that risky to have to admit, well, we spend 20% of our budget pretending we might need it, only to be shot in the foot when they realize that they should have. But Tony, in the end, no one predicted we would have 2 years of a pandemic either. So the spend in the early days, it was get us through this hump. And all of a sudden, it's a 2-hump camel here.
Yeah, but Joe Oliver made that point. Now we've been through it. It'll be very interesting to see what the lessons from COVID are going to be. And I think a lot of it is going to be flex and surge capacity in the future, which it was after SARS, too, when I was health minister in 2003, but unfortunately, those lessons were lost over time, and here we are. Yeah. We've got about a minute left. Gary Marr, I want to say this. Jack Mintz was on my program this week as well. He was saying Alberta's got its mojo back. Has Alberta got its mojo back?
There is some evidence of that. The economic growth projected for 2022 is 6.1%. We've had announcements of billions of dollars of investment, ranging from a green ethylene cracker from Dow Chemicals and probably other petrochemical projects coming on stream. We've had jobs created with announcements from Amazon setting up a center here, with Infosys and Emphasis creating quantum computing jobs. You've got the recent decision, the final decision on Canadian Pacific acquiring Kansas City Railways for $31 billion.